Welcome to this explainer. Look, today we are on a mission, and it's a really exciting one. We're going to rescue ancient texts from the dusty, boring pages of academic dictionaries. We'll be diving deep into the Itivuttaka texts, which is this absolutely fascinating collection of the Buddhist sayings. But we aren't just going to read them. As specialist translators of Pali Buddhist texts, we are going to visually unearth them.
So let me ask you a question. Have you ever felt like you were being fed all this abstract, lofty philosophy when the Buddha was actually giving concrete, physical instructions? We rely so much on translations that have just been softened over centuries. But what if the original words were infinitely more visceral? What if our modern translations are literally hiding the concrete truth of the experience?
Section 1. Beyond the Dictionary, the Magadhi Method.
Okay, let's dive into exactly how we're doing this. To get to the real truth of these texts, we are completely throwing out any reliance on later Sanskrit, Chinese, or Old English interpretations. Instead, we're using a strict three-step method. Step 1, we act as dedicated Pali translators, consulting standard baseline definitions from the Pali Text Society or the Dictionary of Pali to get our first modern English translation. Step 2, we shift gears and become ancient Magadhi Prakrit experts. We use the atta, or intent, from the Neti, and the Niruti, or linguistic insight, from the Patisambhita, to dig right down to the ancient root of the word for our second translation. And finally, step 3, we act as modern visual storytellers. We take the gap between those two translations and turn it into a bright, vivid, highly saturated visual storyboard with massive fonts, replacing those blurry concepts with visceral reality.
Section 2. The Roots of Ignorance, avijjā.
Let's kick this off by looking at the very root of all unskillful things, found in Itivuttaka 14 and 40. The text talks about the core reason beings are trapped in a cycle of suffering, using the specific word avijjā. If we apply step 1, our standard Pali Text Society dictionary definition, we get ignorance, lack of knowledge, delusion. Now, be honest, when you hear lack of knowledge, it sounds incredibly academic, doesn't it? It kind of makes it sound like a mere lack of school education, like you just have a slightly confused brain because you skipped a few classes.
But notice the massive contrast when we apply step 2, our Magadhi Nurati breakdown. In the ancient root, a means without, and vijjā relates to light or vision. So the root doesn't mean having a bad memory or failing a test. It literally means being plunged into pitch darkness. It is a literal physical blindness. The delta here is huge, right? We go from a simple cognitive error to a severe physical deprivation of light.
And here is step 3, our visual translation. Picture a highly saturated, incredibly vivid image of a heavy, thick blindfold tied tightly over someone's eyes, even though they're standing right in the middle of a brightly lit room. It's not a foggy brain, it is a physical, heavy blindfold that absolutely prevents you from seeing the vibrant reality right in front of your face. This concrete visual perfectly connects back to the original text. In Itivuttaka 14, the Buddha says beings wander for a long time because they are enveloped in a mass of darkness. He literally says tamo khandam petahalayum, shattering the mass of darkness. You don't shatter a lack of education, you know? You shatter a physical barrier to light. Section 3. The Fake Holy Life, Brahmacharya. Let's move over to Itivuttaka 48 to see the physical consequences of living a lie. The text discusses people who fail at the ethical foundation of the teachings. Our standard step 1 translation for this foundation is Brahmacharya, usually defined as the holy life, chastity, pure conduct. Again, the holy life feels like a lofty, somewhat unreachable moral standard. It sounds like a box to check on a religious census, completely detached from the visceral reality of human actions.
But if we apply our Niriti linguistic insight to the root, Brahma means supreme or divine, and Karya means walking or moving. It's not just a checkbox, it's actively walking like a god. And Itivuttaka 48 gets incredibly specific about what happens when you violently fake this walk. It rapidly breaks down 2 specific types of people bound for the underworld, or Niraya. First, the person who is unchaste but publicly claims pure chastity, and second, the person who falsely accuses a pure person of being unchaste. And the Buddha doesn't just say they're bad. Listen to this intensely visceral quote from the text. Better to swallow a glowing hot iron ball than to eat the country's alms food immorally. The ancient Magadhi language uses extreme, agonizing physical sensations to explain moral failings.
Now think of the visual storyboard for this. A bright, pristine white robe, the very symbol of purity, desperately trying to hide a glowing, red-hot iron ball. The high contrast of the scorching red against the pure white is exactly the point. Faking the holy life isn't some minor clerical error or a philosophical misstep. It is literally burning yourself from the inside out.
Section 4. Faculties of Awakening. Indriya. So we've looked at the darkness and the burning. Now, Itivuttaka 62 introduces 3 indriyas to help us break free. If we look up indriya in our baseline dictionary, we get faculty, controlling principle, mental power. Wow, controlling principle sounds incredibly dry, academic, and bureaucratic, doesn't it? It completely loses all of its active, real-world momentum. But let's look at the Magadhi intent. Indriya comes from the root referring to Indra, the chief of the gods, a conqueror. These aren't passive, abstract mental states floating around in the ether. They are sharp, active, physical tools of the senses used to literally carve out reality and conquer ignorance. They are weapons of awakening. And this brilliantly illustrates the progression described in the text. There are 3 specific tools. First, the tool of I will know the unknown. Second, the tool of actualized highest knowledge. And third, the tool of the one who has finished the job, one who knows. This isn't just reading a textbook, it's a person actively climbing a literal, physically demanding staircase of awakening.
Visually, imagine a pair of legs powerfully ascending steep concrete steps, leaving behind the defeated, chaotic army of Mara, the personification of death and illusion, way down at the bottom. The text specifically says the one who reaches the top wears their final body, having conquered Mara. This proves the path is a deeply physical, sweat-inducing triumph, not just a quiet mental shift.
Section 5. The ultimate peace, Nirodha. Finally, we reach the climax in Itivuttaka 73, Nirodha. If you've studied this topic, you've heard this word translated over and over. The Standard Dictionary defines Nirodha as cessation, stopping, extinction. I don't know about you, but extinction sounds incredibly bleak. It sounds negative, final in a very bad way, and completely uninviting to a modern listener. I mean, who wants to strive for extinction? But look at the linguistic delta when we break down that Magadhi root. Ni means without or downwards, and Rodha means a prison, a wall, or a dam. Nirodha isn't disappearing into a bleak nothingness like blowing out a candle. It literally means shattering the prison wall. It is the complete and total unbinding from confinement.
So the crucial takeaway here is that Nirodha is a wildly dynamic escape. Our visual translation needs to be a dark, claustrophobic concrete prison wall, dramatically shattering outward, revealing a vast, incredibly bright, open, and boundless space. It's moving from the painful restrictions of form into the ultimate, uncontained peace. In Itivuttaka 73, make sure we know this isn't just theory. It says, touching the deathless element with the body, the perfectly awakened one teaches the sorrowless. Notice that phrase, with the body. Kayena. The ancient texts insist that this ultimate peace, this shattering of the prison wall, is a literal, tangible, lived experience. You feel the freedom physically. By looking past the standard dictionaries and digging right into the physical Magadhi roots, we've seen that this path is visceral. It's about removing literal blindfolds, spitting out hot iron balls, actively climbing steps, and shattering prison walls. So I want to leave you with this provocative thought. In your own modern life, are the abstract words you use to define your reality quietly building walls around you, or are they tools to finally shatter them? Thank you so much for exploring this with me.